What's up everyone, my name is GazzyB123 and welcome to this week's vlog. A couple of things to talk about before we get into today's session, starting with these lovely pocket queens. First things first, the what would you do from last week. We had 9-8 of spades, of course we called it off. We didn't fly all this way to fold a backdoor flush. My opponent had ace deuce of clubs, can't beat that. I think the hand is fine, I think we should just go ahead and call the river. Secondly, I think she cheated. And thirdly, I am just back from Texas, played some really big pots, played the biggest pot of my life on stream, got lots of great action, so go ahead and sub to the channel because I'll be releasing some vlogs from that trip very soon and you won't want to miss those. On to today's session, playing 10-20 in the Hustler Casino in Los Angeles, lots of big pots, lots of great action. Let's check it out. We're in early today and get the game started 5-handed. In our first hand of the day, the button is limped and we look down at a couple of mamacitas in the big blind and make it $100 to go. The button makes the call, and on the 8-8-5 flush draw flop, we bet out $75. The button makes a quick call, and when the 10 of spades rolls off on the turn, the button immediately double checks his whole cards. I didn't think much of this at the time, but in hindsight, he's probably not going to do this if he's just turned a flush, so I should have bet again here instead of checking. After my opponent checks back, I bet $175 on the river for value, and I get paid off by pocket sevens. It is a nice start to the day for us. How much is it?
70.
210.
Wow.
It was a very fun day today overall with lots of banter between the players. I 3-bet to $210 in one hand and verbalized it because I was eating my eggs and didn't want to put them down. My opponent folded and the table jokingly said that the power of verbalizing made my opponent fold, to which well-known pro DGAF poker blind raised under the gun to $210 in the very next hand to test this theory.
I might just say 210 right now.
That's fine.
Does it have the same effect?
Find out. Try and see.
210.
Did you look at your cards?
Yes, I did. You think I'm fucking stupid?
I did.
And the test came back conclusive as he got a walk with his pocket deuces after raising blind. It's still very early in the day and the straddle is already on. In this hand the cutoff is open to $100. I'm in the small blind with a very pretty ace-jack of diamonds and throw out the re-raise to $380. The straddle looks down at his cards and throws out a call, and the cutoff has the classic "well I'm priced in now aren't I" look on his face as he decides to call as well. We don't make a pair on the flop, but we do have plenty of backdoors working for us, and it's a good board for us to rep ace-king, aces, king-queen type hands, so I make a continuation bet for $375. The straddle quickly folds and the cutoff makes the call. The turn is the deuce of diamonds. I now have a flush draw and less than a pot-sized bet behind, so I decide to go ahead and shove all in. My opponent looks as if he doesn't love it and then makes the call. He then says something I really wasn't expecting to hear. I need a diamond. I smiled and told him that he really didn't need a diamond, and even though we run it twice, my hand doesn't improve. My opponent turns over king 10 of diamonds, and we have been felted in the very early stages of the game. Still, there's no point sulking about it. I reach in for more chips and get on with the game. The chips are flying early on today and we are getting involved in a lot of pots with a lot of good hands. Next up, the straddle is on again, the button is open to $100 and I look down at king queen offsuit in the small blind. This hand is 99.9% of the time a re-raise pre-flop for me, but there's a very active player behind, so I decide to just call. The straddle calls and we go three ways to the flop. It is the exact flop we were looking for and things continue to go well for us when the button c-bets for $125. If we were heads up, I would raise this hand very often, but we still have a very active player behind, so I decide to just call. The straddler folds and we go heads up to the turn. The turn completes the flush. We didn't really want to see that, and when the button bets $400, we are for sure proceeding with caution and just call. The river is the brick of all bricks, and when I check, I'm kind of relieved to see my opponent snap check back. We show our hand and the healing process from being stacked hath officially begun. Next up, the small blind is limped, the big blind makes it $155 to go, and I'm in the $40 straddle with queen jack suited. Once again, I'd be re-raising this hand almost always, but I want to let the limper stay in the pot, so I decide to just call. We go three ways to king jack 8 with one spade. We've got middle pair and backdoor straight and flush draws. The button c-bets for $300, I make the call, the straddle folds, and we get a disaster ace on the turn. We pick up no extra equity, and when my opponent bets $700, it feels like there's nothing else that we can do here, and I just let it go. Next up, our buddy D-Gaff has opened to $50 under the gun. A very loose player is called behind, and we pick up pocket 9s for the first time this trip. Calling is obviously fine here, but I think squeezing is definitely okay too, so I make it $275 to go. It doesn't stay $275 for long, as the original raiser puts in the 4-bet to $750. I really don't love it, but we're around 3.7k deep at this point, and he's definitely capable of doing this with some hands that aren't queens, kings, aces, and ace-king, so I make the call. The flop is queen 6 deuce all hearts. I check and my opponent checks it back. The turn is an offsuit 3, and we're kind of stuck in this too strong to bluff, too weak to value bet nether region, and I decide to check. He bets $800, and I think just going ahead and folding is best. He's kind enough to show us for the camera, and even though we had the best hand, there's still not a whole lot else we can do about it. It's been a tough start to the day, and I feel like I'm getting run over a little bit. I'm peeling 3-bets with the right type of hands like this king queen of clubs, but I'm not connecting with any flops and having to do a ton of check folding. It's really easy to get frustrated in these moments and start playing way too many hands, but it's something I manage really well these days. Patience is key to crushing live poker. We're down about 2,800 at this point, but it's early, we're feeling good, and we're ready to grind it out. Up next, it's time for our PLO double board bomb pot hand of the week. I pick up a fairly unattractive king jack 6 deuce, but when the two flops are dealt, we've managed to flop a boat on one board with very little else going for us on the second board. I decide to bet out here for $225 in late position to thin the field a little bit, but when I get 3 calls, I decide that I'm going berserk on any 3, 4, or 5 on the deuce deuce 6 flop. The 3 rolls off and I pot it for $1,300. We almost always have the best hand on the first board, and it feels like we can make so many 2 pairs fold on the second board. Plus, people don't like drawing when faced with a $1,300 bet. And by that I mean other people, of course. I would totally be in there with a draw. My plan works, I take it down, and we're scooping in another nice one on our way to getting out the hole for the day. Next up, we look down at ace-4 of clubs in the straddle. The big blind has made it $60 to go. I re-raise to 180, and he makes the call. We flop a gut shot with a backdoor flush draw and bet 1/3 pot. My opponent makes a quick call, and we get an ideal turn to continue barreling on, firing out again for $430. We put pressure on all of his non-queen 1-pair hands, and we've also got outs for days if we need them. Thankfully for us, our opponent lets it go, and we pull in another nice pot. Up next is an interesting hand, and I think I may have missed a bet here on the river. I open pocket 7s in the cutoff and get called by the button, the small blind, the big blind, and the straddle. Absolutely no respect here for my raise. There is 1 overcard on the flop, but we have the best hand here a decent amount, and we benefit from value / protection, so I decide to bet out here to fold out hands like queen 9, ace deuce with a backdoor flush draw, those type of hands that could beat us on future streets. The big blind calls, the straddle calls, and on the deuce turn we all decide to check it and take a free card. It's a really good river, the jack rolls off and both my opponents check. I think for a minute and decide to check back. My 7s are good and I scoop, and I really don't think I'm being results orientated when I say that we have a really clear value bet on this river for half pot. Both players can call with hands like pocket 5s, ace-6 suited, and they would likely bet their better hands on the river, so I think I've missed a bet here. Oh well, what can you do? Up next is my favourite hand of the day. We're halfway through a round of straddles. The button is raised to $100, it falls to me in the 40, and I look down at a very pretty jack 10 of clubs. This hand is always a re-raise for me, so I pop it on up to $450. My opponent thinks for a moment and then makes it $1,100 to go. We're about 5k effective at this point, and I decide to peel. Peeling is fine here versus the regs in these games because they will 4-bet bluff the right types of hands, so I kind of just play my online ranges in this spot. We're off to a flop, and it's not a bad one at all for our hand. I check, my opponent throws out a very small c-bet here for $300. I would raise here with some of my nut flush draws, but decide to just call this one. The turn is a jack, and when I check, my opponent checks back. He's definitely capable of checking some hands like ace-king, ace-8, and pocket aces here, as he should sometimes, so it's not just a case of him always having king-king or queen-queen. The river is a glorious 4 of clubs, and I decide to play for all the marbles. I shove it all in for $3,600. My opponent goes deep into the tank. He's fidgeting in his chair, talking to himself out loud, going over the whole hand, all the combos I can have, all the better hands he has to call, all the while I'm just sitting there praying to a god that I don't believe in, begging for a call. 3 whole minutes go past before eventually my opponent sighs, picks up his cards and throws them into the muck. I really thought I was going to get called, so I felt a little disappointed in the end, but given I just made an absolute ping on the river, I can't complain too much. A couple of minutes later, while I was typing out the details of the hand into my phone, I asked the table, "What was the river?" 4 o'clock. Oh, was the club on the river?
Fuck off.
To jokingly pretend that I didn't have the flush. I don't know exactly what my opponent had, but I'll wager he's just hero folded ace king. What a play, nice hand, sir. We're not quite back to even yet, but I'm feeling really happy to be on my way out the hole after such a tough start to the day. Next, I look down at pocket sixes and raise in late position. The big blind calls and the straddle decides to raise it on up to $310. I have a pretty standard call in position here. The big blind folds, and what an excellent flop for us, flopping middle set on a really good board for the 3-better. He bets $250, and I'm no live tell expert, but I can tell when someone is strong. I would never normally raise this hand here, but I go with my read and I make it $700 to go. My opponent immediately sits up in his chair and I'm counting out his chips in my head because I know what is coming. Sure enough, he goes all in. I snap call, he turns over his pocket aces, and my pocket sixes hold on both runouts. It's a really sore one for him, but it's nice for me to cooler someone else and scoop in a very pretty pot in the process. Players have been coming and going all day. At times the game has been really good, and at other times it's been pretty stale. This is really standard for live poker for the action to ebb and flow. The action is picking up again now, and in this hand the button is open to $50, the big blind calls, and I peel in the straddle with 6-4 offsuit. This would normally be too loose, but both players have come from the PLO double board bomb pot table. They're stuck and they're looking to gamble. The flop comes down ace queen 6, nothing to get too excited about just yet. All 3 of us check, and on the 4 turn, my heart gets racing a little more. I bet out $150, the button calls, and my knickers are soaked through when the big blind rips it in for $1,900. We can obviously be behind here, but it's kind of hard, and I didn't fly all this way to fold 2 fucking pair, so I reshove, the button folds an ace face up, and we're up against ace 7 offsuit, running at once for this pot worth over $4,000. We managed to fade any nastiness on the river and have stacked 2 opponents in our last 2 playable hands to catapult ourselves into Profitville for the day. At this point, we're up around $5,500 for the day. It's been a really fun day. We've made some hands, we've played some huge pots, and even though the game is very reggy, everyone is giving a great deal of action. The game is now 5, 10, 20, 40, and I pick up ace 5 suited on the button. I open to $100, a new pro in the game who I haven't played with before makes it $450 in the small blind. Really easy peel for us, and we see a flop. We've got bottom pair, but not a whole lot else going for us here. My opponent c-bets for $550. There's nothing else we can do other than just call. The 7 of spades rolls off on the turn. My opponent slows down, and our hand is too strong to bluff, too weak to value bet, so I check it back. On the 10 river, my opponent checks again. I snap check back, and he shows me pocket kings. I don't think he was ever folding that, so I'm very happy I didn't decide to turn my hand into a bluff. We've now got a double straddle on the go, and I haven't studied up on my button opening range in a 5 blind game, but I'm pretty sure opening king 3 suited to $200 is going to be fine here. The 40 calls, the 80 calls, and we are 3 ways to king jack 8 with 1 spade. I'm happy that I flopped top pair, but I'm a little taken aback when the older fella in the first straddle leads out here for $600. Straddle 2 gets out the way and I make the call. An ace rolls off on the turn, and when my opponent checks, I can't do anything here other than just check back. The 6 on the river changes nothing, it goes check check, and my opponent turns over king 10 offsuit. Nothing we can really do about that, it's the same as the last hand, it kind of just plays itself. It's been a really fun day, lots of huge pots, great action, but I can't help feel a little tinge of disappointment at losing the last 2 medium-sized pots. Still though, I rack up my chips and head to the cashier, booking a very solid win of 3.3k. Straight after the grind, several of us travelled through to Long Beach for dinner. We went to a tremendous seafood and steak place, ordered a fuckload of both before heading out for a couple of drinks, and concluding with a lovely midnight scooter ride around the streets of South Los Angeles. A really awesome way to finish what had been a very fun day overall. That's all from me for this week, guys. Take it easy.